Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to talk about pay-per-view within boxing. I feel like pay-per-view is quite a contentious topic within the sport because many fight fans don't really want the sport to be behind another paywall, right? Because you have to pay, especially nowadays, you have to pay for a DAZN subscription, and then you have to pay, say if the likes of Anthony Joshua is fighting, then you have to pay for another 20-30 quid. If you're in the US, that goes right up to $60. So it's quite a lot of money behind a paywall, especially if you're paying for other subscriptions like Sky Sports for football, TNT Sports, etc. So I feel like sport nowadays is quite expensive to watch, and pay-per-view is something that many fight fans don't like. And I just wanted to give my thoughts on it and how I see it going forward. So, I mean, since the arrival of Turkey and Riyadh season, there's been a lot of talk about, there being not being pay-per-view. And in fact, Turkey back in July of this year told fight fans that Saudi-backed boxing would end the pay-per-view model. That essentially mean that events will be free for DAZN users, which, as you can expect, excited many fight fans. And many fight fans were sort of like happy about there being that, but were happy to see the removal of another paywall. But it's come to my attention as I was doing a bit of research that the Anthony Yard and David Benavidez fight, which is the fight that Turkey said would be free for DAZN subscription, is actually on pay-per-view, and it's priced at £25, I believe, and then $60 in the US, which isn't what was expected and isn't what many people would want to hear. Now, just a bit of like brief history about pay-per-view. I mean, the first major boxing pay-per-view event was in 1981. Sugar Ray Leonard fought Thomas Hearns, and that was a big success. And then Mike Tyson became the first sort of like pay-per-view megastar. Tyson against Holyfield, in fact, was one of the first fights to earn over $100 million in pay-per-view revenue. And then obviously you had the likes of Mayweather, De La Hoya. There was a lot of fights in that era which sold quite well. Oscar De La Hoya against Floyd Mayweather in 2007 had 2.4 million buys, which was then the biggest pay-per-view in history. 2010, Mayweather against Pacquiao. 2015, Mayweather against Pacquiao, 4.6 million buys, $410 million pay-per-view revenue. But then, with the arrival of DAZN in 2018, DAZN promised to sort of get rid of a pay-per-view model and operate and become almost like the Netflix of sport, which, again, excited many fight fans, but again, they opted for the pay-per-view model. And I kind of see it from the promoter's perspectives and also the broadcaster, right? Because DAZN spends a lot of money. I mean, I did a video recently talking about how much money they've spent on buying up rights and how much money just they're losing each year. I mean, it was $1.4 billion a couple of years ago. That number went down slightly to 936 million. I mean, it's not a sustainable model. I know their founder, Lem Blavatnik, has invested almost $7 billion over the last decade. They've got investment from the likes of Surge, who are like the sports arm of the PIF investment fund. So I don't see their model being sustainable, and from the broadcaster's perspective, I can see why they'd want pay-per-view because, I mean, just to give an example of the Canelo Alvarez deal that they signed, it was an 11-fight deal worth $365 million, so a lot of money. Works out about $35-40 million a fight. Now, they're almost left with no choice but to have to resort to pay-per-view and to almost like claw that figure back. So I can see it from there. Again, the arrival of, the Eddie Hearn has echoed that sentiment and said, well, he wants the fighters to be paid, especially when there's a big fight. and he almost feels like there's got to be pay-per-view in order to sustain that. I think what Frank Warren is along the same lines, although he's almost said that perhaps there's too much pay-per-view events, that there doesn't need to be, I don't know, like you don't need to have one a month. Only a select few. I mean, Fury against AJ will be on pay-per-view, and that'll be big numbers. So I guess pay-per-view should only be reserved for those big mega fights. I mean, Parker against Wardley on pay-per-view isn't great optics. Nor is this upcoming ring card, especially. I mean, they have resorted to pay-per-view. I mean, I know Eubank against Ben was pretty good, but that build-up almost warranted pay-per-view status, whereas, and I think that reached over a million buys. Who fought recently is Beterbiev against Bivol that didn't do very well in the US. I think it got maybe a couple 100,000 buys. So, I mean, unless you can sell a fight really well, like an AJ Fury or a Ben against Eubank, again, that will be on pay-per-view as well, I think, then it's almost very difficult to put things behind a paywall nowadays, because people, A, won't pay for it, B, they'll find another alternative to watch it. So, which brings me on to the point about Turkey. It's quite confusing, really, because the events that he's helping to put on, so Beterbiev against Bivol, for example, he must have spent a lot of money paying the fighters, and it didn't do that many pay-per-view buys. So, again, like him saying back in July 2025 that he wanted to eradicate the model, and then now almost going back on his word and saying it is going to be behind a paywall, doesn't sit well. And it also sort of gets to the point where you think it won't do well, so you almost think, well, why is he putting it behind a pay-per-view wall? I think he and DAZN are going to have a meeting and come back with a ring pass, which almost should have been done in the lead up to the Benavidez against Yard fight. The ring pass being allowing for people to essentially watch all the fights, so all the pay-per-view fights, I think is bad. So in summary, I think it's bad optics for Turkey to go back on his word and almost put this fight behind a paywall. I don't think he'll get many pay-per-view buys, to be honest with you, because of that. And I think he should have introduced the ring pass sooner. So, yeah, those are my quick thoughts. I mean, do I think pay-per-view should still be in boxing? I believe if you're the likes of Frank Warren or Eddie Hearn, yes, because you almost can't survive without it, especially because of the amount of money that, for example, an AJ Fury would want. Maybe you get enough people behind, maybe you get enough sponsors and people behind it where people can, view it through their subscriptions. But I think for fights like that, I think it makes sense to be put behind a paywall. But for Turkey, a man who's able to put on fights and not care about the amount of money that it costs, I think it's a bad look. And I think, he's dropped the ball on this one, I think. And I think you're starting to see that with many fight fans. So, yeah, those are just my thoughts on pay-per-view within boxing.